I would like to welcome my guest, Dr. Peter Coleman. Peter is a professor of psychology at Columbia University, and among the many roles he plays, he's co-executive director of Columbia University's Advanced Consortium on Cooperation, Conflict, and Complexity. He's also the author of several books, including one we feature on our project website, and it's one of my personal favorites in this whole area of research that's been done about polarization. The name of the book is The Way Out: How to Overcome Toxic Polarization. He's also the creator of the Once a Day Political Challenge that just officially launched last week. Peter, since you are one of the world's leading experts on constructive conflict resolution, I thought it would be great to have you share some thoughts on our effort to bridge divides in El Dorado County and to tell us about the political challenge that you just launched.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here, and I do think I've actually been through El Dorado County. I was looking at a map of it earlier, and I'm pretty sure that in my travels through these
Yeah,
years, I've been through there. So it's it's an honor to be invited. So thanks for having me here.
yeah, it's a beautiful part of the state. Northern California is just east of Sacramento, and it
Yeah,
it starts in the foothills, almost down in the valley in Sacramento, and extends all the way up to this beautiful Lake Tahoe area. And
yeah,
it's also an interesting county in that it's about half of the registered voters here are registered Republican,
right,
and
yeah.
just under half are Democrats. And but what we've been trying to do is to with this initiative is to pull people together to see if we could find some common ground and begin some dialogue around I mean, first of all, just getting to know each other and being in the same room with each other is an
Yeah.
important thing, but uh, to be able to find ways to listen to each other and to bridge our divides. And I have to say, one of the really gratifying things that has happened is when we first went out about 6 or 8 months ago to see if there was any appetite for doing this in this very divided county. Um, the one thing almost everyone agreed on is that we have to find a better way. This
Mm,
isn't working, and
yeah.
people eagerly signed up to come to a big convening we had that kicked this whole thing off back in September of 2022. Peter, you say something in your book that we are in the grip of a more than 50-year escalating trend of political, cultural, and geographic polarization. Can you just speak a little bit about that and how that has come about and how that's affecting people like us here in El Dorado County?
Yeah, sure. So again, if you look at, there are different measures of political polarization. Some of them are at the national level. Look at like voting records in Congress between Republicans and Democrats, but others are done by groups like the Pew Research Council that just polls people and looks at our attitudes towards members of the other political parties and of our own political parties over time. And the data has shown pretty strongly that since the mid to late 1970s, we have gotten more polarized as a nation, both bottom up in terms of how we feel about them and how they feel about us, and top down in terms of our politics at the federal level and at the state level, and the divisions there, and the lack of the decreasing bipartisanship, the decreasing capacity to problem solve together, to come together across party lines and co-sponsor legislation and pass that legislation. So it's a long process, and as I said, there's no one cause of this. There's a variety of things that have happened over time. This is more of what we call cloud problems. It's you can't go in and just say, okay, if we just stop gerrymandering, or if we just change the algorithms on internet that sort us into red and blue camps. All of there are many factors that are contributing to this divide that we're all experiencing. But I have to say, I'm impressed by even your description of your county, that you're almost a 50-50 county, and there's an appetite for trying to figure out what to do. That's promising. That is the best thing that I can say about our country right now, is that most of us are exhausted and fed up with the status quo, and we want to try to find a better way forward. And that's a great place to start.
I have said to some groups that I've met with that the intensity of the polarization that we're witnessing today, I think, represents the single greatest threat to our overall well-being, greater than the threats to our economy, the bank failures we've been reading about, global warming, immigration, world peace. Because if we can't talk and listen and try to understand one another, none of those problems is going to be solved. I'm wondering if you think if I wonder if you think I'm exaggerating when I say that it poses the greatest threat.
No, not at all. I mean, again, it's interesting. If you poll most Americans today, they see, we see them as the greatest threat. Republicans see Democrats, Democrats see Republicans as the greatest threat to our country, more so than climate change, more so than guns, more
Mm.
so than, international actors. So, that, says something about the importance of this division and the power of this division. But I agree with you. It's something that I call a first order problem. If a if what we've seen happening, which is a spike in political violence, and a spike in militia actions against the infrastructure of our country, if that continues, we are going to tip into what Barbara Walters calls a civil war, right? A political uprising, and that's a qualitatively different state than we're in right now, and it's something we want to do everything we can to avoid. And this polarization that we have in our federal government and at many of the state governments impairs our capacity to solve problems that we're facing. AI and chat GBT, and the automation of everything, right? Climate change, guns, we're gun safety, even if it's just gun safety, right? These are problems that 90% of America wants to solve, and we can't, because our leaders are posing and performing for their base and pitting each other against each other, as opposed to solving problems. I agree with you completely. This is a first order problem, and it's something that we all have to give serious attention to and take some responsibility for in our own lives.
Peter, you agreed that we've taken a good first step. We sort of set the stage that one thing that people agree on uh, countywide, at least the leaders and many others we've spoken to, is that, yeah, this is a serious problem. I don't want it to continue. I'm willing to come and learn more. But what
Yeah.
piece of advice would you offer now to those of us in El Dorado County going forward in terms of how we can really bridge our divides and sustain this so that we can look back 5 years from now and say, that was a worthwhile effort. In fact, there's still things going on today that have made this county even stronger than it was before.
Yeah. So yeah, there are some basic things that I would recommend, and this comes from, part of what we study is other societies that were deeply divided, even at war, and at some point they stopped and pivoted and took a different direction. And so some of their processes, and that, for example, Costa Rica did this in 1948, came out of a bloody civil war and changed directions dramatically. This has happened in Mauritius and Africa and Botswana. It's also happened in Scandinavia and New Zealand. There are these countries around the world that had a lot of internal turmoil and at some point came out of it intentionally. And so a lot of these actions I'm going to recommend are things that we've gleaned from these societies. The first thing I would recommend is that people seriously think, if you're about to engage with somebody on the other side in dialogue or conversation, or even just at the diner, ask yourself, what do you want to do here? Do you want to get into an issue that maybe you don't know much about, but take a position and challenge them and get into a fight, if that's what you want to do? And frankly, a lot of Americans have a lot of energy for the fight right now, right?
Mhm.
That's fine if that's really what you want to do. But if it's something that you've done and done and done and feel like it gets out of control and it just alienates you from people and it's making you crazy, then you may want to try something else, right? You may want to try to approach that conversation in a different way and being clear about your intentions. What I try to do when I reach across our political divides is listen and learn, because I don't understand them. I don't understand why they have the political attitudes and opinions they have about things like guns and immigration. And so I need to listen and I really need to learn. And so that's what I intentionally do. And it usually leads to a much better dynamic. So I would start by asking, what do you want here? And then I would say, if it's looks like, if it looks like it's going to be a challenging conversation, you may want to find a space where you can do that. And that means it could be that somebody who's a good broker of conversations like that, so you invite them along. Or there's a website called the Bridging Divides Initiative, and it's a map of the country, and they've mapped something like 8,000 community-based organizations that are helping red and blue Americans come together and have conversations. And I would imagine in your county, you've got a handful of them. So go to the map. It's an interactive map. You can zero in on your county or your town, and you can find the places that are doing that. They're oftentimes, places of worship or community organizations or the Y, or, there are these kinds of places that are organizing around bringing us together in respectful conversations. So if you feel nervous about doing it on your own, find, these groups that know how to do this well and tap into one of them to start those conversations.
And I think that's probably related to something you refer to as positive deviance, or it's kind of
Yeah.
connected to that, which
Yeah.
that phrase jumped out at me when I read it. Uh, and I want you to talk a little bit about it, but I think my understanding is that, rather than going for honing in on the places that are really struggling and say we've got to solve that problem, is go to the places that are working despite all of the odds, that people across political divides are actually working well together. And but what's
Yeah.
the point of doing that and taking advantage? Some people have told us, oh, you're inviting the people that are already sort of getting it to these
Yeah.
things. We need to reach the other people that don't get it.
Yeah. Well, again, so the idea of positive deviance comes from both international humanitarian work and international peace building, where we've made a lot of mistakes for the past several decades. The UN or the international community flies into a place and says, okay, this is what you need to do to fix it. And here, try this program or this policy or whatever, and we'll fund it if you do this. And then it doesn't work, right? What we don't do is show up in places and say, well, are there groups of people that are respectfully talking to each other and actually are solving these problems locally? Do they exist? And is there a way we can just support those groups as opposed to bring in our own half-baked ideas that don't work, right? And that's what we recommend, is that, as I said, there are going to be people, individuals, and groups in your communities that are doing good work. And so you want to try to identify them first, go to them first, as opposed to, asking outsiders to come in or coming in with new ideas. See what's already working and start there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Peter, I mentioned a little earlier ago an initiative that you just launched. I think it was last week. It's called the Once
Yeah.
a Day Political Challenge. I wonder if you could tell people here in El Dorado County what it's about and why you think it's an important strategy.
Yeah. So, I wrote this book, The Way Out, a year and a half ago, and realized last summer, nobody reads books anymore. So, even though we're in this bad trajectory in this country, we really needed to do something. So a group of us, including my oldest daughter and some of my former students and friends, sat down and said, all right, so if we were going to really do this in our life every day, like, what would we do? What are the small things that I could do for 5, 10, 15 minutes a day to start to, basically bring the temperature down, check myself, check my own kind of friend group, and, and start to make a difference because it's kind of like a practice, it's something that you need to do. If you want to get good at baseball, you got to be in the batting cage. If you got to get good at golf, you want to be on the range, singing guitar, right? I've got the guitars right here. If you want to do that, you got to pick it up and play, right? So this is what we're trying to do is encourage people to have daily habits. Part of the reason we do this is because many of these groups that I'm referring to that have encounters that they set up provide these great opportunities, but they're, an hour and a half or 2 hours, maybe once. And that is a great thing to do, but it's not enough. We really need to start to sort of change our own habits. So what we did is just created like 100 different, what we call micro activities, little actions that you can take. We encourage you to sign up for like a few weeks. The first week, it's mostly about you and doing little things to reflect on you and your attitudes and your tendencies and how you tend to respond when you're in conflict and things like that. So that you again, increase your own sense of what you're bringing to this party and what you might want to mitigate or make adjustments to. The second week, importantly, is your friend group. It's the people that you're comfortable talking to politics about, but that maybe has become kind of tighter and less tolerant of both them and, dissent. And so what can you do to start to bring some daylight or honesty or candor back into that group? Third week is about reaching across the divide. As I think I mentioned, half this country is alienated from somebody in their family or their friend group because of politics. So it is about reaching out to those people. And how do you start to do that in ways where, you can feel okay about it? And then ultimately your community, are there community level issues that both red and blue Americans are concerned about? And that's many of these organizations that move from, dialogue and getting to know each other to identifying these problems to action. And so are there groups that I can take action with? So what we encourage you to do is every day, choose one thing, try it out. You may hate it, you may love it. Ideally, you do this with friends. You find somebody else, a couple people at work, whoever, who are willing, who, are also feel kind of fed up and want to try something else. And try these things because it's good to have people to complain to. If you try something and it's hard
Yeah.
or frustrating, it's good to talk about it, right? So we recommend that you do these in groups, and it's up on a website. There's an organization called Starts With Us, which helped us set this up on a website. You can go to it every day. It's organized across 4 weeks, once a day, 5 days a week, for you to just pick an exercise. Gives you 5 options. Some of them take 5 minutes. It's like take a survey and then think about what it means for you. Listen to this song. Get out and take a walk. There are different things that we recommend that you do. Some of them are much more active. Some of them are really about reflection. But there are little nudges that can help you work on you, your friend group, reaching across the divide and working in your community, because at all of those levels, we need to start to shift how we live our lives.
It's such a wonderful compliment to what we've been doing. I've been worried, we get people to come to big events. We had 120 people in the county that came to the first one. We've had online events, conversations about homelessness. They've gone really well, but I'm thinking, 2, 3 weeks later, was that event enough to get someone to really
Yeah,
sort of tip in a different direction and say, I'm going to start incorporating this? Maybe, I hope so.
yeah,
But what this
yeah,
does is, I think your analogy is great, looking at the guitars behind you, or thinking about,
yeah,
a sport that you might want to get better at. You don't just go to a one-day clinic and get a lesson and say, I'm now on the path to being a great guitar player.
yeah,
But if you're doing it regularly and you have something that's sort of given to you as an idea to try out, and then you're talking about it with your friends and saying, I tried this, but it was really frustrating, or this was amazing. What was your experience? After
yeah,
30 days, it feels to me like there's a real possibility that your approach to uh, dealing with the polarization and bridging device could actually change in a more fundamental way.
Yeah, that's what research tells us is that, in order to start a new habit, it really does take, a few weeks, sometimes, 4 weeks or 5 weeks or something. And what our we piloted this last summer. I've written a couple of Time magazine articles about this, and what that group found is that it was very helpful to do it in a
Mm,
group. And at the end of it, they said, "We want to keep doing
mm,
this. This is great, but let's not stop.
yeah,
Let's keep this conversation going." And again, it doesn't have to be regimented. It doesn't have to be every day. It doesn't, but the idea is let's find some things that we can do together that help us check ourselves, check our own group, reach out to the other group, and try to change this dynamic. We can do that in particularly small groups.
yeah. That's a great
Yeah.
idea, and we'll list the links both to the Time magazine articles, but also the where people can sign up if they want to take on this challenge and give people a chance in El Dorado County to be part of it. And hopefully, we'll have some stories to share back with you when people after they participate in it. So
That would be fantastic. Please do. Please, give us feedback, share it, let us know how it works, what did, what didn't, we're interested, and we're learning and revising it as we go.
well, terrific. Well, Peter, thanks so much for sharing your insights about polarization and what we in this county can do to bridge our divides. We will keep you posted and
Great.
hopefully get some stories about from people that participate in the political courage challenge, and hopefully have some positive stories to share about how we've managed to bridge our divides and to build an even stronger community than we have now. And it's really a wonderful place to live. But I'm optimistic that we'll look back on this several years from now and say that it was an important turning point in the life and times of this county in Northern California. So, Peter, thank you so much for being part of this effort here in El Dorado County.
No, my pleasure, and my congratulations to El Dorado County for being hungry to do this and mobilizing to do this. That's a critical first step.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. So
Yeah.
long, everyone.